Thanks for downloading this episode of Cork Talk with me, Tim Atkin. A weekly conversation with some of the most famous people in the world of wine.
This podcast is brought to you in partnership with Noma Cork by Vinventions. Driven by a commitment to innovation, the new plant-based Noma Cork Green Line offers significant improvements in wine closure performance. Thanks to a rigorous oxygen ingress rate, you can decide which cork is best for your wine, whether it's for young and fresh wines or for those with ageing potential.
Niki Segnit is an expert on flavours, having written 2 best-selling books about the subject. I caught up with her before she jumped on a plane to Andalusia to talk about her eureka moment tasting a bottle of claret from Waitrose, unexpectedly delicious food pairings, like Leigh and liver in lager, how we inspire kids to eat better, her mistrust of recipe books, and why she's on a mission to give home cooks the courage to strike out on their own.
Hello, Niki, and welcome to the podcast.
Hi, Tim. Thank you for inviting me.
It's a wonderful, enormous pleasure to have you on the podcast. Where are you right now? Because you're a bit of a traveller, aren't you?
Well, I used to be. I've got small children, but I am in London, in the Angel of Islington.
But about to go to Cadiz and Seville, I think?
Yeah, we are. We are about to go off to Seville, Cadiz, Jerez, and hopefully eat lots of wonderful seafood.
Yeah, they certainly will. Lots of stuff I want to talk to you about, including seafood at the beginning. Just tell us a bit about your upbringing, because you were brought up in Hampshire. Was food a big bit of your life growing up? It
was, but I'm now reflecting on it in quite a sort of, I don't know, in a very ordinary way, because my parents, they weren't part of the kind of Elizabeth David kind of classes. So they weren't very, trendy with their foods, but they cared about what they ate. My mother cooked everything from scratch. My father was like really into deep sea fishing, was and is his hobby. So we often had lots of really good quality fresh fish. We ate very kind of ordinary food, but we cared about, if we were having fish and chips, it had to be from the best place that did fish and chips. If it was Cornish pasties, they knew a place where the Cornish pasties were the best. So there was a yearning for quality of some sort.
But I love the idea that your dad, I think your dad's 80 now, is he? But he's still into deep sea fishing. Does he kind of go out there?
He is. He's still got a fishing boat. And when he can get some people to go along with him, he's still out there chasing cod.
I love that idea. I mean, by your own admission, you weren't that interested in learning to cook until you really moved to London later life. I mean, who is, I suppose, as a teenager? But sounds like music, clothes were a bit more appealing. And you weren't, I'm surprised to hear, very good at science, because the book is quite scientific, bits of it.
Yeah, no, I really had a very poor. I mean, maybe I could have had a grasp on it. I just wasn't interested at all, and I could blame my teacher. But given that I was not interested in a lot of academic subjects, it possibly wasn't their fault. I was just into reading fiction when I was a kid, and horses, and then into clothes and music, and so. I don't know. I was just really well fed by my parents. And then when I moved to London, then I did the teenage thing and ate badly. And then I got fed up with eating badly. And I really missed kind of eating, the good food that my mum cooked. So I actually got the same book that she had, which was a Marks and Spencer's all colour cookery book, which was very kind of, it's really, really 70s, but I still have it and I still use it a lot. It's a really good basic book.
I mean, were you always good at English? I mean, you said you like reading.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know good at English. Yes, my poems would be entered into the kind of competitions and stuff. I mean, they're probably hilarious to read. But yeah, I was always really into reading and writing, yeah.
And then you got a job in a library, didn't you, at Southampton University?
Exactly. It just really, really followed. So when I left school at 18 and I got a job in Southampton University Library, which I would maintain still is the best job ever. It was really, really wonderful. I ate cottage cheese and chips with a shot of Bell's for lunch every day.
Bell's whiskey?
Yes. The great thing about working in the library is we work with lots of blue stocking women who kind of, we would drink kind of a tot of spirits at lunch. So I joined in with that. And I look back, you look back on some of these things from your youth and think, God, that was weird. And then I really wanted to move to London, and that meant kind of just making a compromise with my life and leaving librarianship, unfortunately.
And you got a job in the death tax office, as you call it, right?
Yeah, I did a test for the civil service, and unfortunately turned out I was good at numbers, or maybe they just stuck me in the death tax office. You know, it's inheritance tax now. But I mean, it's just, you could not imagine a gloomier place to work. It was like Terry Gilliam's Brazil, and it was in Shepherd's Bush.
With lots of heartbroken people phoning up. I don't know why I'm laughing. It's not funny at all. But
Oh no, I mean the clients were quite cheerful in comparison to the tax inspectors that worked there. Yeah, I mean, it would be quite hard to make up. It was Gloomsville.
Was it chance that you went into advertising next and you ended up working with food and drink clients, like Coca-Cola, Unilever, Diageo? Did you kind of choose that once you'd gone into advertising?
Over a long period of time, I shaped that. So when I started in advertising, I was a secretary, and then I was working in the art department. And then I asked to be moved over to strategy because I just found it really interesting what people like, trying to find out what makes somebody buy something, what interests people in particular brands. I wanted to do that. So I moved into that. And then after I'd been doing that for quite a long time, I said to my boss that could I just work on food and drink clients, because I had by that time got really into cooking. And I wanted to kind of fuse my work life with my interest. And so then I was working with, people like Coke and, Hellmann's mayonnaise and stuff, and where you are doing product development, you're getting right into the very heart of like a brand and what it makes, as well as kind of how you present it. So I was doing sort of I think I worked on Coke with vanilla and all sorts of things like that. So I was starting to sit in sensory tests and things like that, which, obviously when I came to write the Flavour Thesaurus became, something quite useful.
And then you had a bit of a eureka moment with a bottle of wine, didn't you? And it wasn't anything terribly grand. I think wasn't it a bottle of Waitrose claret or something like that?
It was, now I wish I could remember. Does this sound right to you? Is it, Seigneur Aguil?
Yeah.
There would be the second wine of Chateau de Guil. Is that right?
Yeah. Could be. Could well be.
Is that right? I mean, I think Côte de Castillon, and like not a particularly, definitely enough Bordeaux. And, but my husband and I, we drink we were drinking a lot of Plonk. We were drinking a lot of nice enough Chilean reds, but quite characterless, quite sweet. And I think I just really don't remember why I bought this particular bottle of wine, but we had some people over. I tasted it. And it really did just stop me in my tracks, because it was so different to what we were drinking. And it was so, I suppose the word is, it was just so, it had finesse and it was noticeable. And it just really arrested me, really grabbed me. And I thought, okay, now I need to find out more about what it is about, this wine that is so different and is so delicious. And so I signed up for a course with the Wine and Spirits Education Trust and did their short course, which you just kind of learn the very basics of tasting, but you're sitting in a room with people who are mainly quite interested, quite engaged, because a lot of them are starting out in their, they're working for one of the big wine stores or whatever. And that was great. I loved it. The teachers were absolutely brilliant. And so I went on to do the 13-week longer course where you're really getting into kind of tasting, different Chardonnays side by side. Yeah. And, I find that mind blowing. I loved it so much.
So it was wine really, in the sense that took you into flavour, did it?
It really did, because firstly, it taught me the difference between taste and flavour, but also I think just that the beauty of it, the beauty of, here are 6 wines that are made from the same grape, but they're all really different, and they're different in a way that you, even an amateur, very new amateur, can see. It's poetic, man. I loved it.
Just define for us quickly the difference between taste and flavour that you learnt on the course.
So, and I think probably also when I started to read textbooks about flavour science, who perhaps explained it in such a brilliant way that, the taste is sweet, sour, bitter, umami, salt. that you kind of distinguish with the taste buds in your mouth and other places around your body. So I think bitter taste buds go all the way down into your stomach, don't they? And then, so that gives you, as I say in the introduction to my book, like a back of the envelope sketch of what something is like. And then flavor is mainly experienced through the nose, through the olfactory bulb. And so it's really smell, and you can taste it. You can tell the difference. You're most aware of that difference when you have a cold, where you can still taste whether your lemsip is kind of like sort of a mix of horribly sweet and really horribly bitter, but you can't necessarily tell when it's really bad, whether it's a lemon one or a blackcurrant one.
Yeah, yeah. It's interesting, isn't it, about bitterness going right down into the stomach. Presumably that's a kind of last line of defense, because a lot of things that are bitter are poisonous, whereas sweet things don't tend to be so. That's why we taste sweetness towards the front of our mouths usually, don't we? I think we're all slightly different, but do you find that?
I don't know if I've ever really, it's crazy, isn't it? I don't know if I've ever really kind of thought about it. I do remember learning the tongue map at school. And I think having read since that's kind of discredited a bit because it's a bit more of a jumble than that. But, I don't know. I think it's a really good excuse to, get a lot of sweet stuff in. And maybe I've got a thing about affogato at the moment, the ice cream with coffee and brandy. I think maybe that would be a really nice thing to distinguish sweet and bitter and stuff.
I think that'd be very, very, very interesting. I just wonder how important things are, like where people come from and what they're accustomed to in terms of the way they perceive or dislike certain flavors. I mean, do you find that when you're talking to people, you suddenly think, I hadn't thought of it in that way?
Yeah. I mean, it's much more important than any of the other kind of factors, really. So, you can see websites and books that try and take a much more hard line about the kind of science and the, shared molecules and things and what that means for their compatibility. But really, it's much more, what we like to eat together and what seems to kind of be harmonious is much more to do with where we're from and what we've grown up eating and kind of it's more, as I say, it's much more poetic. It's much more personal, than just a kind of molecular story. And one of the first people I spoke to when I started out working on the Flavour Thesaurus was a guy who'd been a flavor scientist all his life. And he told me, he said, here is the story you need to hear. When I was a kid, he said, growing up in post-war, my mother gave me orange juice and cod liver oil every day. He said, and I'm now in my 60s, and there are days that I crave that.
Was she giving them to him?
Yeah, mixed together. And, you know how horrible that cod liver oil stuff is. And yet, he's talking about craving it. And I think that's it. It's that familiarity and also the context, it's your mom. It's, it's kind of given to you as a basis, like this is good for you, or it's going to kind of, make you healthy in some way. That's just such a beautiful story, isn't it? Because anyone knows that orange juice and cod liver oil it's not nice.
I don't think it's going to be a great match. It's funny. I have a slight aversion to salted porridge, is what we call it. And it's because I remember my grandmother when I was a kid, like forcing this stuff down me, and it wouldn't be, I couldn't stand it. So I think it kind of works both ways, in a way, doesn't it?
No, absolutely. I mean, aversions. You could say a lot of aversions are more to do with texture than they are taste. When you think about the things that you don't like, a lot of things that people don't like celery and rhubarb. And I could see that porridge is quite frightening in textual terms to some people.
I don't like oysters particularly. I think it's partly the texture. I kind of find them a bit kind of slippery.
It must be entirely the texture. And also, with oysters, maybe it's the idea.
Also, I had a bad one once, and that kind of puts you off a bit, doesn't it?
That definitely, because I think there's this, when you're sick as a result of eating something that's bad, with food poisoning, then as a rule, the brain remembers what that was, and it puts you off eating it for a long time. So as a lot of people feel like that about tequila because they drank too much of it and were sick when they were teenagers. So it's often quite a difficult drink to offer at a party, isn't it? But there's a great story about a guy who was an Irishman who was on, maybe this is a bit unfair, but who was on a boat and he was enjoying some whiskies on the boat, and then it got very rough. And he realized that if he was sick, it was going to put him off drinking whiskey for the rest of his life. So he ran and got a coffee. And so the body blames the last thing that it consumes. So apparently he drank a coffee and he had a lifetime aversion of coffee, but he didn't have to give up the Bushmills.
The whiskey. Just tell us how the idea for the flavour thesaurus came about, because it's interesting. It was rejected by lots of people. I mean, as often brilliant books are, but you eventually got this deal. I mean, how did you come up with the idea? Were you just sitting there one day and thought, hey, why don't I try matching this with that? Or why has nobody done this book before?
It's sort. I mean, both of those things, but not that further. I was watching a TV program. I was watching MasterChef, and somebody put two unlikely to me ingredients together, and the judges really rhapsodized about it. And I thought, well, I need to. And I was, I was very into cooking by this stage, and so I was always interested in why. Not, strawberries and balsamic vinegar is really amazing. And I think, well, why? Why doesn't anyone ever tell me why that's a really good combination? Why something odd works? And so I thought I'll go out. I mean, I don't know why I thought that I would find this book, but I went off looking for it in a bookshop and it didn't exist. And then I looked very extensively online to see if there was something like that, and it didn't exist. Joked to my husband that I would write it myself, and then forgot about it. But I think about a week later, the title, The Flavour Thesaurus, dropped into my head. And that was, that brought with it the form of like a Roget's thesaurus, an index of, basic combinations in the back, and then a sort of more, thoughtful, elaboration on each of those pairings would go into the front of the book.
And how did you decide how to organise the chapters and the pairings? Because there are 99 flavours, and some things didn't make it, and I know people were pissed off that courgettes didn't make it in the first book, but they made it in the follow-up.
Yeah.
Right?
The courgetterati.
The courgetterati. How did you decide on the 99?
Well, I really just made a list, and the original list was 160 different ingredients that I thought were common enough, or, I mean, I say, and I say that with truffles and caviar both included, but common enough or interesting enough to include. And then quite a few of those things could be folded in together in terms of what their flavor was and how they work with other things. And then I just got to, and then it sort of came down to about 100. And then I ran out of time at 99. And the one that got next was courgette, because actually describing, I mean, some things are really easy to describe. Like, I came across in the new book, something about somebody was saying, miso is hard for Westerners to describe. And I thought, my God, have you ever tried to describe the flavor of a courgette? That's hard to describe.
It's bland, a courgette, isn't it? It's sort of green blandness. Can it be green and bland?
I mean, I think the closest I feel like I got to it tastes like rainwater. You've got that kind of, it is very watery. It's got that kind of earthiness, and it's got a certain kind of, the earthiness of, it was so slightly muddy earthy rather than some of the prettier, earthier flavors. So that was it, really. It was a bit kind of arbitrary in the way that a lot of artistic things have to be.
That's what makes it fun, I think. I think you said some people sit down and read the whole thing from cover to cover. I mean, I have to say I haven't done that, but I dip in and out all the time. And I love that, because you suddenly think, I haven't read that bit for a bit, or let's see what Niki thinks of that. It's a very personal book, I think. And it's, it's a dictionary, as you've said. It's a recipe book, although some people describe it as an anti-recipe book. We'll come on to that in a minute. It's also a memoir. It's a travelogue, lots of anecdotes, stuff about writers, painters. I love that. Culinary history, horticulture, anthropology, and a bit of science. Yeah. I mean, which kind of books and authors influenced the shape of the book? Was there anybody who'd done something similar in a different discipline? You thought, okay, I could maybe nick a bit of that structure.
Well, yeah, I suppose you're looking for things like what would I want to read, particularly when you've never done something, never written a book or anything. Actually, I'd never written anything before. So, what do I want to read? Well, I'd like to read something like David Thompson's biographical dictionary of film, which fantastic is just really fantastic, isn't it? And so you pick it up because you think, I've just watched a Nicole Kidman film. I wonder what David Thompson says about Nicole Kidman. And you open it up and there's this great short essay about her work and her talent. And then of course you're so hooked on David Thompson's brilliant writing. And he's, there's lots of facts, but there's also lots of opinion and there's lots of other cultural references. It sends you off on a little journey, I think. And, you're writing notes in your book about films that you want to see or want to seek out. So that was very much in my mind. Was there, I think there was something else there was a piece of food writing by MFK Fisher called I Was Really Very Hungry. I've forgotten which book it's in because I'm, but that was very much like, that's my favorite piece of food writing ever. And it's a fantastic short story about a meal that she has on her own in, I think in Burgundy.
And you're very good at doing this. I mean, I don't think it probably just comes to you naturally of having this very conversational style. It's like, it's like chatting to you in a way or listening to you. You get a sense of, hey, this person's on my side in a way. This person shares my interests and is keen to share stuff with me about what has moved her in a way.
I think that comes out of knowing where I stand in relation to the reader, who is, of course, me as much as anyone, because I was writing it because I was trying to find out the answers to this question. So you're talking to yourself in a way, but also, I'm not a chef. I'm not trained in any way. I don't have any position here other than being maybe somebody sitting in my kitchen talking to somebody else who's really interested in the subject. So it is, I suppose it takes on that chattiness because that's the position I should occupy.
Yeah. Were you surprised by how successful it was? I mean, as you said, you weren't a chef, you weren't on TV. It was your first book. And it just took off, didn't it? I mean, you've sold how many? 250,000 copies, probably more by now, haven't you? And God knows how many translations there are, but loads, I mean.
Yes, lots of, it's translated into 15 languages, which is a lot for a food book. And, yes, it's just coming out in Vietnamese. So, and it's really, it's great because it's in lots of, translation, it's in French and Italian and Spanish and, and Japanese and Korean and lots of foodie cultures. So that is really surprising more than anything, I think. Just the fact that you take this, because it's always going to have it's always going to be written by a girl of a certain age, woman of a certain age from Hampshire who's had this kind of food. It's like anyone's flavour thesaurus would be different. Everyone who wrote that book would do it differently. But I thought there would be a small amount of people who were like keen cooks like me who would be interested. I was a bit amazed by the fact that it was as popular as it was. I think everyone was, as you say, it was most people didn't really see the commercial possibility of
as
it.
You said, it's rejected a number of times. I mean,
it's rejected a lot. Yeah. But I think it's very difficult when something is so different, when something is really new. It's very hard to be the kind of person, the editor in or any art discipline to say, I can see this. And it's great to find people that did. It was Richard Atkinson, who was at Bloomsbury at the time, just a brilliant editor, and very into that kind of thing, I guess. So you find, like like in love, you hope to find someone that feels like you do about stuff. But what is really weird about it is it is still quite a difficulty, is not being established, not being networked. So, I think that's still kind of a bit of a issue for my work. But on the bright side of it, it kind of passes from hand to hand. So, it turns up in some very famous chefs' bookshelves and things like that. And you think, somehow that's gotten to their hands, and it just passes from person to person, which is really good, because it's kind of that sort of word of mouth is the media money can't buy, right?
Yeah, exactly. I mean, was the fact that, it was the heyday of Ferran Adria at El Bulli and Heston Blumenthal at the Fat Duck. Did that help in that they were kind of doing quite weird things with snail porridge and all those sorts of things? I mean, I can't even remember how many different flavours there were at El Bulli. I mean, amazing.
Yeah, I think it was partly that what was going on at that time partly helped create the book, because it was things like, those things were making the tabloid press, like Heston's making exactly snail porridge. There's, oysters with passion fruit jelly, all those things that, I think that really stoked my fire at least. So I couldn't imagine that they would. And I think that we're still living in a time when, that kind of flavor frenzy is still very much, right? The gin flavors and all that kind of thing. Everywhere you go, there's a lot of excitement, I think, about trying new things.
I think that's true. One of the things, many things I like about the book, all your books actually, is that they're not prescriptive. It's a guidebook in the best sense. I think your aim was to liberate people, to say, hey, you don't have to follow a recipe slavishly, give them the confidence to go out on their own. Was that consciously something you wanted to do?
I mean, really, absolutely. So that was very much what was in it for me. So when I started writing the Flavour Thesaurus, I could not follow a recipe. Even though I had been cooking for decades and really very widely and had a lot of experience with ingredients and things, but not any freedom. And so when it got to the point that I had to kind of include like little running recipes, they're more like sort of serving suggestions, a lot of them. But I had to try things together. I had to make things up or adapt recipes. And so at that point, I started to let go, and that freedom, that kind of look, not that much can go wrong kind of feeling in the book. It's, how bad can it be? It's very rarely you're going to end up throwing something away. It just might not be particularly good. That is throughout, very much in natural cooking as well. That idea of like just learn to take your hands off the handlebars a bit and start. There are so many good reasons to do that, not just to take yourself to the next level of what kind of cook you are if you're a domestic cook, but also to use up the things that you have in your kitchen.
Well, and I think you said that your mother and grandmother, who were both very good cooks, home cooks, didn't follow recipes, really. They were basically just cooking with what was fresh in many ways.
Exactly. Well, they didn't really, my grandmother didn't own a recipe book. I don't think. She had some pamphlets from, say, McDougall's Flour and that kind of thing. And my mum had
Reader's Digest.
Yeah. Well, I mean, just things that came free, but they were like, there was a couple of them. Mum had 2 or 3 cookbooks and a scrapbook. And now, of course, we live in a place where you can't move for recipes.
Yeah. I mean, I've certainly got way too many myself, really. Tell us about the second book, because it was more of a recipe book, which was lateral cooking. But again, you sought to sort of establish these patterns between things, don't you? I think I like the way you do that you're looking to order things in a way. What inspired the idea behind that book? It's a more practical book in a sense, isn't it?
Yeah. It's sort of, it looks a bit more conventional. I'm not sure if you read it, it feels quite so conventional, but it's, the idea was, so it started out as the Flavour Thesaurus cookbook. I don't know, that wasn't what it's going to be called, but that was the idea. It's like, how do you take flavour and apply it to, so I was having to do that for the Flavour Thesaurus, which is, do I understand at the heart of it what an ice cream is in order that I can make an ice cream of any flavour? So I suppose that's what that book is about. That book is about what is the basic underpinning of a recipe so that you can apply your own flavor to it. So that's where it started, but then it became a little bit more mathematical, I suppose, in that I started to see how, for example, if you take the whole kind of custard family, how you could join up something from, if you could start with the custard tart and the custard you put in a custard tart to bake it. And how that, what do you have to do to change that to make it creme caramel? And what do you do to that then to turn it into a creme brulee? And how you could kind of plot things on a continuum, really. And that if you understood that, if you understood what happened to something if you changed using whole eggs and milk to make a creme caramel and then changed it to cream and just yolks, then you not only did you learn how to make 2 things, but you understood what the difference was between how those ingredients affect that dish and so they kind of taught you a little bit about cooking and ingredients, but also they're like for each one of those basics, there was kind of starter pack of flavors. So it's very much, I think it's the way that kids should learn to cook, because it's just sort of teaching you that all batters are essentially the same. And, if you can learn a ratio of, 1 cup of flour and 1 cup of water or milk, then you're kind of like, you're there.
And is that the approach you take with your own kids? Do you teach them to cook like that?
Can lead a horse to water. You can't make it drink. I try. I think they're very young. They're like 9, just 9 years old. So my son is very interested he's quite into baking. My daughter is quite like a lot of kids, kind of quite interested and then gets bored quite quickly. So I'm at the moment more interested in trying to make them understand or give them an experience of what real food tastes like.
Yeah, that's important, isn't it?
I don't think, I mean, I'll do the cooking with them when they feel like it, but, and also try and drum some of the basics into them of like, you know, this is made up of exactly the batter thing. Like this is a pancake is going to be 1 cup of flour, 1 cup of milk and an egg. And just, you know, if you can count up to 1, you can make this. But with the rest of it, I think at the moment we're much more like, this is what real things taste like. This is what an apple pie made at home tastes like. And this is what, bolognese, you know, so that they're not kind of growing up in a processed food.
Yeah. And
world.
Things are in season in a way. Yeah.
Well, yes, probably not as strictly as I should be, to be honest. But you know, in the autumn we go blackberry picking and stuff. So they have some idea of that. I think, yeah, I'm not sure how brilliant I am at that, but yeah, maybe it's a thing to think about, Tim. I can improve.
Yeah, I'm sure you can. But, I mean, we know this sort of classic matches, particularly if you're a wine writer. There are certain things that people say, hey, this goes with that. But part of me thinks and wonders, are they always as good as people say? I just wonder if you could give us 3 flavour combinations that really surprise you that people should try. Not classics, but things that you, Niki, found and you thought, hey, that's brilliant.
Okay, well, I mean, one that I just love, and I just so looked forward to writing about it in the first Flavour Thesaurus, is coffee and blackcurrant. And I remember when I was writing about it, it was, I don't think on Google I got more than like 4 matches for coffee and blackcurrant at the time, because it just wasn't something that you would necessarily hear about. But I had eaten it in a hotel restaurant somewhere near Chamonix in the summer, going on like a hiking holiday. And they made this dessert, and I think it was a sort of, I forgot what it's called, because it was something, Vacherin glace, layers of meringue and cream, and a very, very rich, very strong coffee ice cream, and a beautiful blackcurrant, sorbet where the blackcurrants weren't oversweetened. And just the coming together of those things. And it was such an exciting combination. You know, you've got a lot of sourness and bitterness going on with a lot of sweetness as well. And I just thought it was so incredible. And then as time's gone by, I think, some coffee, merchant said, actually, you'll find blackcurrant coffee in this particular type of coffee. They're really, really strong flavor notes. And it turns out that also in Italy, in some of the kind of more northern regions of Italy, some of the red wines contain coffee and blackcurrant notes as well, very noticeable. Isn't that beautiful that you just find this kind of in these lovely natural vessels of those 2 flavors? So I just think, there's some lovely clues within that. So I think that would be something to play with that's really beautiful. What else did I, God, now they're all the coffee ones are coming to me. I don't know why they come so unusual. I went to a tasting of cheese and chocolate at the chocolatier Paul A. Young's place. And we tried lots of different chocolates and cheeses, but one was a washed rind, quite smelly cheese with milk chocolate that was amazing.
So like époisse and milk chocolate.
I don't think it was époisse, but I can't remember. I think it's in the book. In the first book, it says what the actual cheese was, but it was, yeah. I mean, it was challenging, but it was really, really good. I mean, it was almost the if you like, the shape of the flavor, how they release, the fat and how they release the flavor and the kind of strengths and stuff just seemed to mirror each other. So it was, it was a sort of beautiful parallel, but obviously 2 very different flavors. I think the chocolate and cheese thing is perhaps, also quite explained by if you like quite a rich dairy milk chocolate, you might quite dig that. I'm trying to think of a weird from the new book. What have we been trying? Why does my brain go?
Tell us about a no-no. I mean, I always love that film, the Mike Leigh film, the Life is Sweet. Do you remember the Regret Real? I think it's Timothy Spall who plays the chef, doesn't he? Where he's doing like a liver in lager and a saveloy with kiwi fruit. I can't remember what it is exactly. Is there anything where you've said there are not many things that are so bad they have to go in the bin, but are there any things we just thought, this is a no-no?
That film, by the way, is so funny. What do I think is a no-no? I'm I'm dead against chocolate and strawberry. I think that's a terrible combination. I think they really don't do anything for each other. And, ditto. I mean, ginger is used with quite a lot of fruits, and that's kind of hangover from a time when it was thought to match cold and hot kind of thing. So things that, so like melon would make your body very cold, and, so you'd have ginger to warm it up. And I think rhubarb and ginger too, I think comes from the pharmacy. Not good. No, I mean, I don't, and there's not a lot of kindness there. I mean, obviously anything that you can, if you add enough sugar to it, you can probably make it work. But I think it's quite hard to think of that. But coming back to the cultural background, a lot of people have grown up with putting ginger in their rhubarb pies and crumbles and stuff, and would take great issue with me saying that. Mm-hmm. But I think, if you're looking at
the courgettistas again, they're going to be after you.
Yeah, exactly.
The rhubarbistas.
Yeah, exactly.
Tell us about the second book, because you published it, I think, last year. Second flavour thesaurus called More Flavours. This is plant-led, isn't it? Although, as you said, custard features in it, among other things. How does it differ from the first book? Is it just that it's plant-led?
Yes, I mean, mainly, and in fact, even in that way, it doesn't differ that much from the book. So it's plant-led in as far as so what happened was I wasn't really going to ever write another one, because writing the first one was just such a trial. And I just didn't think I wanted to. But actually, towards the end of writing Lateral Cooking, which took 8 years to write, towards the end of that, I started to think of all these different ingredients that I wished that I covered. And that kind of started to, I guess, get the better of me, thinking, oh, I wish I had written about pomegranates, or I wish I'd written about courgettes, taken that challenge, and beans. And I love lentils. And, I really like quite a lot of, to eat quite a lot of vegetarian food. So I was kind of starting to build this interest in a lot of things that, just doing that research and getting stuck in, and thinking that there would be a lot more material to draw on, which didn't turn out to be the truth. But I was sitting in the pub one January with my husband, and I was just taking a big gulp of draft Guinness. And it literally just came into my head, like, I'm going to write another flavour thesaurus. And at that point, it wasn't good. I was just going to do all the things that I hadn't done. And then I wrote a list of all the things that I would cover in this one that I didn't cover before. And the only thing that wasn't a plant was duck.
And you left duck out, didn't you?
So I left duck out in the end, but in fact, it was going to be all plants. And then actually, when I got into the writing of that, it became too complicated, because I wanted the books to be very similar in that they contain these kind of serving suggestions and running recipes and stuff. And like to take eggs and, and cheese and things out of at least my kind of worldview, my cooking. I just couldn't do it, because it just meant, because the people I think that have read the first book, they're people who are interested in cooking, or they do it professionally, or they're really interested in doing it on an amateur basis. And they are not necessarily vegans or even vegetarians. They're just people who are interested in flavor. So it just struck me, okay, if I add some of these things back in, I'll put eggs, yogurt, which I really wanted to write about. So yogurt's in this one, and cheese and honey. So
duck is volume 3, is it?
Duck is in volume 3 with cassava. I didn't miss cassava, plantain. There's a little debris of things that I just ran out of time.
There's more to come. Listen, I want to ask you a little bit about food and wine pairing, because you love wine and you're very knowledgeable about wine too. Do you liberate people with your food books, in a sense, and with these flavour books? Do you think people get too hung up on food and wine matching? I've got to have a red wine with this and white wine with that. And would you like to liberate people in that sense too?
I'd like somebody who knows more about it to liberate them. I mean, there's so many books on, and so many good books on matching food and wine, aren't there? I mean,
Victoria Moore book. This book is very good, isn't it? Yeah.
Right. And I mean, I have several on my shelf that when I'm stuck, which I get with certain ingredients are really hard to write about, then you can turn to those people, and just that gives you some clues and start some threads for me when I'm writing. So I don't really feel like I would put my hat in that ring. But what I like about it is some playfulness. The idea that you can sit down to a meal and someone can say, oh, you should try this with this, and it will make it more interesting, or it'll make it taste better, or it'll make it taste different. It's really good fun. Is there a book that's about sort of unlikely food and wine matches?
Well, probably a little bit, but I think people tend to play by the rules. I mean, Victoria's book is very good, I think. I must have you around for dinner at some point, because what we do is we just put 4 bottles on the table, or I serve them in glasses, and we have 1 dish and 3 wines, and we just say, people just talk about the wines and see what's fun. I mean, I've never believed in saying this wine must go with this dish. I think you can just play fun.
I did when the first book came out. Fiona Beckett took me out.
Well, she's very knowledgeable. Yeah.
Amazing. Yeah. And she took me to a Peter Gordon restaurant. What a great choice to go to, I mean, he was so ahead of his time in terms of what he was doing with flavour. Anyway, and we tried some things. She was a bit more like that, but she said, let's try this and let's try that. And it was so fascinating to see the difference that a wine could make to a dish. Yeah. I feel like I probably know, the classics. And I really I like the idea of putting, different wines on the table and trying different things. When I'm stuck on describing certain foods, I will get loads of stuff out of the fridge and just put it on the kitchen table and say, right, try, just go mad. In fact, like have this, what would you call it? Just like as a sort of, trying to find something out of some chaos. Yeah,
it's like an acid party or something. I'm not saying
I love those too. How funny. Yeah, I mean, when I'm really stuck, I'll have an acid party.
Listen, final question is just how do you get away from your day job? Writing, cooking, tasting. I mean, how do you relax? Got 2 young kids, obviously, and that takes a bit of your time. Anything else you like doing just to relax?
A bit, yeah. Well, I think I'm just trying to get back out into the world. I think I'm still really into music, so that is my great love. So
Chrissie Hynde, you're a big fan of Chrissie Hynde. Right?
I love Chrissie. I just think she's so inspirational. I went to see her. She's played at the Electric Ballroom in the winter last year. She's just, she's amazing.
Do you remember that great line? I think she won an award. It was a Grammy or something. Or I think it was a Hall of Fame award. And she said, I'd just like to thank all the people I had to sleep with to get this award, which I thought was quite
exactly. Which of course she wouldn't have done because she's too cool for that. No, exactly, but she likes to shock. Yeah. I think she's amazing. I'm into all sorts of music, fashion. And yesterday, we went to the Sir John Soane Museum, trying to get back into all the kind of cultural things that feed into the writing and that kind of, I don't know, the thing that makes your brain fizz a bit. I mean, that's it. And kind of sitting in the sun has become something that I've decided that I like in my old age.
I agree with that too. Well, you can do that this week when you're off to Seville and you said, and Cadiz. So have fun. Niki, thank you so much for spending time talking to us about your amazing books. I love both of them, or 3 of them actually. So it's great. Thanks for sharing your amazing knowledge and your enthusiasm with us. Good to see you.
Thank you for having me on your lovely podcast.
It's been a pleasure. See you.
Bye.
What an inspiring and fascinating story. And I can highly recommend all of Niki's books. Next week on Cork Talk, my guest is the author, commentator and entrepreneur, Robert Joseph. Join me then.
Thanks for listening to Cork Talk. If you want to read more reports, articles and tasting notes by me, go to my website, timatkin.com. You can also follow me on Twitter @timatkin and on Instagram @timatkinmw. See you next week.